I woke up at 3 a.m. to 4 men in my bedroom. Hard vests, clipped voices. A folder with a seal flashed fast like a magic trick. They said they were assisting federal authorities with an HOA seizure and to step aside immediately. And I remember thinking, since when does a homeowners association do midnight raids and carry breaching tools? Yeah, that happened. And my heart did the wrong thing, while my head did the math. Because fear is loud, but training is louder. You know what I mean? Back then, I was a widower, trying to keep my world upright in a quiet Ohio suburb. My wife, Martha, had been gone 8 months, and the only room that felt solid was the gun room. I kept like a chapel, her father's Purple Heart from Normandy. The M1 Garand. He carried the citation and photos arranged with military precision. Because when you lose the person you love, you start polishing the things that still talk back, even if it's only in your head. A week before those men showed up, I walked in and felt that awful shiver of something off. The metal case shifted 3 inches. My digital safe showing 4 failed attempts, a smudge on the camera lens that wasn't mine. Grief can make you paranoid, sure, but it can also make you precise. And that morning, it made me both. That's when Eddie Torres knocked with a casserole and a "Support our troops" cap. Clean-cut, kind eyes. Said he'd served. Said he knew what it felt like to come home to a house that sounded too empty, and it felt like a hand on my shoulder. From someone who spoke my language, he noticed the photos asked about the regiment, even knew what a field citation looks like after decades of sunlight. And I was grateful for the company, so I didn't question how his questions lined up like a checklist. Value documentation, security insurance, the way an intelligence officer maps a target. He stood in the doorway of the gun room like a pilgrim and an appraiser. At the same time, let his eyes rest on the Purple Heart, with more calculation than reverence, and asked innocent things with very specific angles. Have you upgraded to multi-layered sensors? Frank. What's your routine? Who has copies of the keys? Then he smiled big and said he was just curious. And I laughed along because lonely men are easy to reassure. The other pressure came wearing perfume and a badge that read, Oakwood Estates, HOA President Karen Mitchell, with a sympathy bouquet and a tone that could ice a glass. She shifted from condolences to community safety. So fast, it left wind, talked about liability and property values, and whether I'd considered proper policy updates, given the weapons and memorabilia I kept, then announced an emergency HOA meeting about firearm storage concerns. Like she was doing me a favor, and I sat through charts and statistics and sideways glances. Until the break, when I heard her on the phone in the parking lot for Blackwood. The Normandy piece is real. The M1 has service provenance. We can deliver within 60 days, if the federal paperwork looks legitimate. And when she saw me, she ended the call with a smile that said, I heard nothing. That's the twist that broke the spell. The friendly neighbor and the polished president weren't separate storms. They were a weather system. Eddie doing reconnaissance through companionship. Karen applying legal pressure in broad daylight. And some man named Richard Blackwood buying my father-in-law's sacrifice like it was inventory. So I stopped being a grieving homeowner and started being the soldier I used to be, quietly, carefully on my terms. I ran what we used to call a leak test. Told Eddie a harmless lie about a Civil War pistol getting appraised on Tuesday. And the next day, I received a violation letter about reported commercial activity. Then I fed him another story about motion sensors going in on Saturday. And Karen wrote about unpermitted security upgrades, then a federal inspection rumor. And she called asking what time the agents were arriving. Every fake detail I whispered over coffee became HOA paper. Within a day, that's not coincidence. That's a pipeline. The clincher was under Eddie's mug, a tiny device stuck to the bottom. Not medical, not innocent. A microphone and transmitter, disguised like a nothing. And holding it in my kitchen, I felt heat and cold together. The humiliation of letting a stranger sit in my loneliness and bottle the air. You want to know what I did? I told the neighbors I trusted Mrs. Patterson next door, who sees everything from her front window. Mr. Wilson across the street with a porch camera wide enough to catch a parade asked them to be ready at a certain hour and use a certain phrase with dispatch, suspected impersonation of federal officers. Then I layered the house like a chessboard. Floodlights wired to hit all at once, furniture shifted to make natural choke points. Pepper gel tucked high, where a man would lift his chin. Cameras, overlapping phone-charged mind. Calm, and I gave Eddie one last breadcrumb. I'll be upstairs, alone. Changing safe codes, midnight. Wish me luck, they came at 3:17 a.m. Because people like this always choose the dark, and a tidy number 4 figures in tactical gear moved in formation patches that looked federal. If you were half awake, a folder with a shiny seal meant to blind you long enough to surrender. The first words were loud and official. Federal seizure team, do not interfere. And my switch hit the yard, exploded in white. The cameras drank everything. A baby cried. 2 houses down, Mr. Wilson said. I've got it on video, like a battle flag. The smallest guy took the side entrance and met the first funnel. The spray did what spray does. And the big one muscled up the stairs, shouting about non-compliance. I backed into the second funnel and felt 59 in my lungs. My backup pistol jammed like an old grudge, and for a beat he had me bigger. Man, more momentum. But he flinched when misses. Patterson's alarm shrieked from her porch, a sound like a train losing its brakes. Neighbors appeared like a neighborhood is supposed to appear, not with guns, with cameras and voices and light, and the advantage turned, because courage is contagious when it's documented. You know what I mean. We restrained them with zip ties, laid their fake badges, and forged warrants on my bench, like a museum of bad decisions. Officers arrived fast because the call was clear, and when the texts on their phones said Mr. B wanted the Purple Heart. Specifically, when the messages listed my floor plan and my routines. The deputy's face shifted from curiosity to anger. He said this wasn't local anymore. The FBI came with calm eyes and long questions. Agent Laura Clark and Agent Miller sat at my table, while the sun came up and told me Blackwood had a network running for years, targeting widowed veterans and their families, using HOA power and fake federal language to strip history out of homes and sell it back to the world as curated truth. And they said our footage, our texts, our neighborhood's witnesses tied the whole thing together. Eddie showed up that afternoon, trying one last time to play the protector. Heard sirens last night. Frank, you okay? Maybe it's time for a professional security consult. And I set the listening device on the table and watched the mask slide off, he confessed, and cracked in the same breath. Said he never served. Said his father's Vietnam wounds were ignored, said Blackwood. Made him feel seen, and I believed the pain. Even if I couldn't excuse the harm, because 2 things can be true at once. You can be broken and still dangerous. Karen was arrested a week later in a blazer and perfect hair. She looked smaller without the gavel of her title. Blackwood got picked up after that, and the agents called to say the case opened doors to storage units and paperwork and stolen medals. Across 5 states, families, Started getting calls about returns, about the things they thought were gone for good, and in our neighborhood, Mrs. Patterson was elected HOA president and wrote a clause that protects veteran collections from harassment. We started a monthly history night in my gun room, where kids ask real questions and I answer them slow, showing them the Purple Heart and the rifle and the letter Martha kept safe, because remembering isn't a hobby, it's a duty. People say the law changed too. The Veteran Collection Protection Act. Serious penalties for impersonating federal authority and real checks before anyone seizes anything from a private home. They nicknamed it Frank's Law. In some circles, which makes me uncomfortable and proud at the same time, because all I did was refuse to let grief become a lockpick. Was I right to bait them or reckless? That's the part folks argue about. Some say I should have waited documented. Let a machine grind and maybe grind me up. 2 others say I went soft. That a 3 a.m. fake raid deserves more than lights and a plan. And then there are the HOA debates. Do they protect neighborhoods or hide bullies in laminated badges, you know what I mean? Here's what I know. If you've got a letter in a sandwich bag, or a medal in a drawer, or a photo that hums when you hold it to the light, you don't owe it to a stranger with paperwork, and a patch, you owe it to the person who earned that hum. If this story hit a nerve, if you've seen fake authority used to push someone quiet out of their own life, hit like so. It travels. Subscribe if you want more true stories told plain, and tell me in the comments where you stand. Was the trap a line crossed or a line finally held? HOAs serving communities or themselves. Have you ever watched someone confuse a costume for permission? I'll be there, reading, answering, learning, and tonight I'll check the lights. Sit with Martha's father.